Well, this is one of our special edition ones where we publicize the entire thing.
Minus the members edition only, where we have the erotic insert, where we actually put into practice what it is that we are speaking about.
Exactly. So this special edition I'm very excited about. Men are going to be learning a lot about their own bodies and how to be masterful without being too tame.
And if you want to check out how to train for that, then check out yafab.com. Also, at the Embodied Love University, we're going to be having a men's community where we go into what it is to really develop your sexual mastery, intimacy mastery, and relational mastery. But if you're listening to this as a member, then that erotic insert will be in there. And if you are listening to the free version, then you might want to go ahead and get that membership, because this episode is quite spectacular. I had a lot of fun doing this one with you.
Yes, I did too. I'm super excited about today's episode, maybe as much as you were excited about last episode.
And why is that?
Because we get to talk about you and your cock. So
all right,
these are the topics I really get excited about. I really, really love the title you were playing with for this. Can you say that title?
The Trained Yet Untamed Cock.
Yes, I like this. And I think you came up with that listening to a few stories from me where I was like, well, it's nice to have a trained one, but then it's not nice when it becomes too domesticated and too heady and
I think the word you used was neurotic.
Yeah, there is a neurosis that can happen. So I'm just really happy to be here, have a conversation. The reason I wanted to do that, is to have the counterpart to the judo pussy. Is, what is the counterpart of that? Because it's one thing to have that for me, it's another to be met. And to be met requires that the individual has gone on their own journey. So I would love this podcast to really be about your own journey. And yes, we will have an explicit version that we will insert later. But your journey, your stories, there's a lot of stories. You had a big journey around this, starting with an upbringing that was fairly religious and romantic in beginnings. And then, a lot of your stories, I'm like, wow, that is a full spectrum journey that a human could go on. And you're not even partway done through your life. So I'm very excited to see where this goes.
I'm ready.
All right, so why don't you get us started with typical guy, as you were a teenager, what was going on with your body, your cock? Were you aware that you were aroused? Were you attracted? Did you want to have sex? Were you having sex as a teenager? What was going on there? Let's start you there as an origin, because I think a lot of young men set their pattern of how they function sexually in the teenage years. And often there can be the shadow of shame, or at least rushing through a self-pleasure experience in order not to be caught, which then creates this kind of intensity and anxiety around erection and performance. So just really curious how things started with you.
Well, I was a little bit different in terms of where it started off, in the sense that I didn't actually masturbate until I was 19.
Okay, that's late.
And I also, the first orgasm I had was when I had a blowjob.
Okay.
And no, it wasn't when I was 19. I think I was actually more around the age of 18. And then had my first orgasm when I was 19. Didn't have sex until I was 21.
Is there a reason you held back?
So that was the thing. I was raised conservative Christian, son of a pastor and missionary. And so keeping sex until marriage was what I was going to do. However, though, that meant that only entering and penetration was forbidden. Everything else was on the table.
So there's ways around.
So I always was very sexual, though I didn't really notice that. I mean, later when I had my high school friends find me, as I've been on travels, and they're like, I'm pretty sure that's Aaron who wrote that book. And I was like, well, how did you know? They're like, oh, you always were sexual. I'm like, what do you mean? I wasn't even having sex. They're like, no, but everyone could tell just the way that you were. I was like, what does that even mean?
Were you walking around strutting things?
It's interesting.
Bragging? Or
Because I did have very strong sexual interests, very strong sexual feelings. I just never expressed them. I had lots of female friends that I would spend lots of time with. So maybe that was what the guys sort of associated and thought that I just naturally was doing that. It did develop my friendship side to women, and because I was also a person that was into massage and touch and would read books on that, I think I was very free with that sort of expression. So
wasn't it a teacher who was doing hand massages or something that inspired your
into massage? Yes. Yeah. I mean, it was on a Christian summer camp bus, and I saw one of the female counselors giving a hand massage to one of her female, I don't know what you'd call them,
people she was looking after.
Not a cadet, because that's more military school time, but that she was watching over, and they were one of her cabin girls or whatever, and so she was giving a hand massage and just talking about that, and all the girls were very interested on how to do a hand massage, and I was sitting there and I was like, I'm interested too. And then after she finished, I'm like, could I give you a hand massage, to the camp counselor? And she was like, sure. I mean, a person who gives massages doesn't typically get to receive them, and so I'm giving a hand massage, and she's, oh, that's really nice and everything, and of course all the girls are watching there, and then I just started giving hand massages to all the different girls.
Different than a hand job.
Yes, definitely different. Well, it was funny
that's why you're so naughty and renowned for your sexual prowess.
The hand massage jobs?
Yes.
Well, that was the thing, though, is that to actually have crossed that line, though, from the sensual into the sexual was something that really happened later in life, and was something that I contained inside myself. And in terms of my own self-practice, I mean, I just remember in my teenage years having massive erections through the night and waking up to the point where my cock would be aching, but it never occurred to me to go ahead and masturbate to quote unquote relieve myself. I just held the energy, and I remember several times in the middle of the night getting up and running cold water over myself and just being like, oh, what do I do with this? Breathe through it, everything else. And
good thing you didn't know me back then.
What does that mean?
I would have helped you out.
And so it wasn't just though during my teenage years, but even before that, I remember being in church wearing very tight pants that were, church appropriate, but they were too tight and they would agitate me, and I'd start getting these erections. And I remember my mom sort of being like, Aaron, quit moving, quit twitching, quit jerking around, like pay attention.
Yeah.
She didn't know why I was, but I was literally trying to adjust. And so
that's uncomfortable.
And so when I went off to university and started to buy my own clothes, I remember the test that I would do, I would go into, because I was doing Taekwondo and martial arts. And so I would go into the change room, buy pants, and if I could throw a high kick, not tear the pants and feel comfortable in them, I was like, yes, these are pants that I can be comfortable in.
I actually remember once a client who was a teenager who was really distressed about his erections. He happened to be on the larger side, so it was extremely obvious, and it was he said he was humiliated publicly so many times because he didn't have control of it. And so learning just a simple way to breathe, which is a method that you teach, the inhale push basically.
Yeah, I think you mentioned him to me, and I offered the suggestion.
Yeah, and he was able instantly to start controlling that and just felt so much more confident. So eventually I'd love to also understand through your journey, and there's many facets of your journey, all the beautiful gifts and practices that emerge that really support men to feel relaxed and confident and virile and potent in their body.
Well, I would say the journey really started one summer where it was after my freshman year of being in the dorm, lots of friends that were girls. Towards the end of that year, I just made a decision. It's like, I'm no longer going to be in the quote-unquote friend zone. I'm sick of hearing stories about women with these just seemed like douchebag guys who would not treat them well, but somehow they seemed addicted to them. And I'm like, I just feel that I'm kind of a friend, and I frankly think that I'd be a much better lover. And so literally I told my roommate about this, and we jokingly called it the F stamp. And so then the both of us said we're going to eliminate that. And I just
You
started.
mean like a friend stamp?
Yeah, like the friend being friend zoned. I call it the F stamp.
Okay.
There's an F on your forehead.
Okay.
And so I just started changing the way that I was relating to women, and quickly then it was like I had 10 sort of hookups and stuff, but I still wasn't having sex. And so then that summer I was in, I think it was a Borders bookstore, and I'm in the massage section of the books, which I always love to do. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, what's this? There's a section here on sex. And I remember seeing the multi-orgasmic man.
Okay,
and
cool.
I was all about having these experiences in my body. And I'm like, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
I want to do that.
Yeah.
And so then I literally
Who doesn't?
flipped that book. Exactly. And the guy had a really great cheeky smile on
Yes,
the cover.
he did. I remember the cover. Yes.
And so I literally spent hours with that book, stimulating myself, trying to do what was like the microcosmic orbit and all the different practices,
Yeah.
and trying to have what I thought would be a multi-orgasmic experience. And that really was the introduction to then looking at sex from a different lens. That summer then, it was actually my boss that I ended up having sex with for the first
Jeez.
time.
Is that even legal?
Yes, it was legal. I was 19. She was.
You weren't an adult yet.
Hey, I was over 18. She, I believe, was 21 or close to 21.
Jeez.
She was the office manager for, it was a sales team. And so she herself was a psychologist, head cheerleader at her university, and was graduating that year. And yeah, so that's a whole other experience.
Yes. I'm glad you mentioned the multi-orgasmic man, because for men, there are not a lot of options to learn an alternative way to being with their bodies, being with arousal, being with desire, and actually being a sexual man. And so I think that particular, the Taoist influence in the West, which started, I think, in the 70s, really marked a important, let's say, step in the collective consciousness of, oh, there's another way to be. That,
Yes.
Of course, sex is natural and we do it very naturally, but like all natural skills, running is natural too. So is swimming. You can actually throw a baby in the pool and they'll just start swimming. But to actually learn to swim effectively or to run effectively, even walking effectively, cooking effectively, these things are all natural, but there's ways of doing things where you can bloom.
Yes.
And so I think the Taoists, that was one of the gifts, let's say, they brought. But what I noticed, and I'd love you to talk about this a little bit, because you don't seem hung up on things. That's what I like about you. It was my experience in my journey with Taoist lovers. I was fascinated by them. Like, ooh, men who like sex, men who want to be conscious about sex, men who want to last longer, men who want to be multi-orgasmic. Like, it was just fantastic. I was so excited. Like, oh yeah, like a man who actually want to invest in this type of thing and make this important in his life. And it was all part of my fantasy of the conscious lover. And unfortunately, what I met was extremely mechanical men. So yes, they had a skill set, but they ended up being quite mechanical. Yeah. So I actually found sex rather dry or like boring with them. And I finally got to a place in that particular time of my life where I was like, you know what? I think I'd rather an untrained man with a wide open heart. But the title of today is Trained and Untamed. And I think that's definitely my favorite at this point.
Well, actually, I messed up the timeline a little bit. The truth is that, because as I remember now, it's been a little while since I've thought about this, was that I was 18, I was in military school, everyone around is masturbating, talking about masturbation, and I had never done that. And so it wasn't until then I had turned 19. It was over my Christmas break. And I remember because I had met up with my friend during Christmas break, and he said that there was like grass in the grill of my car that I had driven, because I had kind of driven through some grass. And he's like, "What's the grill? What happened to your car?" And I'm like, I had my first first orgasm. It was an amazing blowjob. And he was like, okay. And I was very excited about that, except that when I actually told him about the experience itself, it was the blowjob that I was interested in. It wasn't the release that I liked. In fact, I remember feeling this energy drop the first time that I'd come, and I'd never felt anything like that before in my life. And I was like, that feels a little bit odd, and it's not how I would expect all these things to be spoken about. And so it wasn't then until I went through my freshman year of university, and then that following summer, after that freshman university, did all the practice. And then it was finally during the following summer after that, as I was starting to get ready to head towards, it was just maybe the summer before turning 21 at that point, then I had the experience with my boss. But it was all after this whole experience of training. And so I had a different orientation on, it's not really the orgasm that is the most sensational part. It's all the stimulation and sensation that you can feel building up to it. But since it was from a book and I was experimenting and doing different things on my own, I was never told this is wrong to ejaculate or that you should ejaculate.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, because there's a few schools of thoughts. One is that you need to. It's a very important thing to do it, and if you don't do it, you're going to be blocked and have problems, and it's going to be not good for you. There's a whole other school of thought, if you do it, it's like really, really bad. So I think that creates a neuroticism in a man's mind and body when he can't just be natural. And so what was called, how do they put it? Ejaculatory control, I think was what it was called. I preferred the words ejaculatory choice, which is now being predominantly used, but it wasn't when I first was exposed to this stuff. And I'm like, being at choice is what feels like that's empowering, like where you can choose in the moment how you want to express your experience.
Well, the piece that landed for me very early on is that it never came from a should perspective. It was, I'd like to experience a multiple orgasm, full body orgasm. So it was always pleasure driven. So all of the practice and everything that I was doing of self-pleasuring was always around, how do I get to experience more pleasure? Not, here's a dogma or an ideology that is going to guide me, and if I don't do that, then it's not going to be good.
I know in your timeline that you had an injury, and there was a lot of things that you had to work around that. Prior to the injury, though, I kind of want to understand, like, okay, a bit how we visited with me. Like, what was it like before you had a trained pussy? Like,
before I had a trained pussy?
Me.
Yes.
But then asking the question to you that you asked me in terms of what was it like prior to have sex. So were you lasting like super long? Like that first time, did you go for hours and hours, or like,
Well, that's a great question, because when I first started to self-stimulate, I remember the first time I masturbated, like I actually was like, there's nothing happening. I'm not ejaculating. Like, this feels really pleasurable. Then the first time I ejaculated, then I was like, okay. But then my body could easily go to that default. But since I was cultivating a practice of, how long can I just last for? I mean, I would stimulate myself for hours. And I remember the first time I spoke about masturbation to a friend, we literally didn't think we were talking about the same thing.
Yes. So you could last for hours alone.
Yes.
But how did that translate?
So then I was like, this is cool. Okay, well, the first time I have sex, it's probably going to be similar. It wasn't.
What happened?
Well, I mean, it was definitely under 15 minutes, I would say.
Okay, but that's still like pretty good.
I'm also, maybe it could have been under 5. I don't really, I just remember it, as opposed to me going into like levels and levels of pleasure and just continuing, I was like, whoa, okay, there we go. And so,
elements you couldn't control anymore. They were
precisely like the pacing, the rhythm, there was just a much stronger, deeper charge I did remember very much being at choice about going into the experience.
Yes.
I remember actually being sensitive enough to myself to tell the other person they were climbing on top, and she was climbing on top. And when she did, she was just so eager to get it inside herself. I remember it actually not feeling comfortable. I'm like, whoa, slow down here. It's like, feels like it's, even with a condom on, it was like kind of like pulling and like, causing pain on the skin. And so I remember like getting them to slow down. I remember then like building up a rhythm, falling into sync.
So you're already a different lover than some.
Well, I mean, there was a taking control of it, but this immense amount of energy all of a sudden when it hit was at a whole other level. And I just remember being like, whoa, okay, let's we're gonna have to do another level of training that involves with another person.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about my experience of what I call like a conscious or awakened cock, because I feel that it belongs to all people with cocks. They can wake up and make their cocks conscious. But it does require some training. It's not like you're born into it. So my experience is there's a charge that's bigger than the actual size of the physical cock. So when you are penetrated by a cock like that, it's so big that it feels like your whole being gets penetrated. Like that there's this, if you can imagine the physical cock and then this energetic cock that's way bigger.
Yes.
That then enters. And so that you get a feeling of fullness that goes beyond the physical.
Yes.
And that's addictive. Once you have that experience, you don't really want to go back, because no matter the physical size of the cock, I've had plenty of different sizes, and even some very big ones, I felt nothing because there was none of the energetics in the experience. So that's a really important one. There's a particular, I don't know what it is, frequency, presence thing of an awakened cock that fills the space, all of the space, not just in the pussy, but in your heart, in your soul, in your being, in your cells. And whether or not you're wanting that level of intimacy, it just actually happens. It's like that. And then there's the trained aspect of being able to surf the waves of pleasure and not be taken by them. That's like a level of mastery that I find really hot in a man who's taken the time to really understand his own nervous system and his own pleasure capacity, and to also understand that there's a rhythm to arousal. And with men who don't have that understanding, which they can learn, I've experienced them being a lot more rapid, anxious, and then they're like, okay, job done. And I'm like, no, we just got started. So, and always kind of like getting their reaction. But I lasted this long. I'm like, that's not that long. Like for me, that I'm just getting started. So I think in the collective of, say, untrained.
And those are typically guys that go 15, 20 minutes.
Correct. So they feel they did a good job because they lasted longer than 5 minutes. But in my body, I like to make love for hours and hours. In fact, one of our friends the other day was just like, but I like to make love for hours, not just for a few minutes. So to have that experience requires that your lover really knows himself and actually enjoys the erotic experience. Because I think some people use sex just as a stress relief. They don't actually really enjoy the whole nuance of the experience. So I'd love you to perhaps take us a little bit on a journey. And know you had an injury which taught you a lot. But I want to understand, were you aware of developing the energetic cock? And were you aware, to share about that awareness if you did have it, or your own version of what you were aware of? And there's the third element of an awakened cock is that it can see and feel in my being and in my pussy the way that eyes could see and fingers could feel. So having that incredible amount of attunement where, you literally know that I'm going to orgasm before I'm going to orgasm, that level of attunement is powerful, because then you can regulate rhythm and experience so that the pleasure gets really expanded and moved. So just want to dive in that direction.
Okay. Well, it started with really doing massage and being able to see things or sense things with my fingers, my hands, my whole body, as I then involve my whole body in a massage to be able to release tension or to help a person just feel themselves more, have pleasure, etc. And so then when I started to look at, okay, well then how do I actually apply that same touch to a vagina internally, where one can't see, but feeling through the fingers, then the natural next step was, well, how do I apply that with my cock?
Well, could you share a tiny bit? Like,
yeah.
What were you doing? Is it self-pleasure that was teaching first some awareness of different sections of your cock, or?
So it wasn't, I would never, I think I did like a training, let's train myself to have a cock that can see. That's something that I have built later, but it came from one, really stimulating myself in a way that I would feel my whole body, feel the room, so that my cock wasn't separate from me. So when I was doing all that self-practice. And then when I went into a sexual experience, very quickly, once I just would take the time to sort of calibrate the amount of pleasure and the rush of being with another person, then I just did the same thing that I was doing with my own hand. And I wasn't paying then attention to, okay, I just need to last.
Yes.
I was paying attention to what feels good in my body, what feels good in their body, noticing that they would match up, and really feeling the breakthrough that, oh, what is feeling good in my body as the pleasure builds up, being built from a place of mutuality, isn't something that is separate from the other person. I feel so many guys, when they would talk about trying to last longer, is they would distract themselves, or you'd hear like, oh, you got to count sheep, or
think about grandma.
Poor grandma. She always gets brought in to, like, you know, it's like, oh, think about your grandma. I'm like, why you got to bring your grandma into it? I mean, like, I was gonna say if that's your kink, but anyways, like, it's like, why even bring in someone else's grandma? It's just, if it's something that turns you off, then the truth is it's going to turn off the person that you're with, whether they know that you're counting sheep or thinking of their grandma maybe. And instead allowing that pleasure to really guide. And so then when you start to feel that, you start to pick up on, well, what are the common cues of a woman's body as she's moving in a certain way, expressing herself in a certain way. But this idea of energy always was sort of spoken about in such a
vague,
woo-woo way that it's nothing to do with the physicality, it's all energetics. And so then I was like, okay, so that means energy and the physical is separate. Well, then I guess I don't feel energy, because whatever I'm feeling is very much tied to the very physical body mechanics, even if one isn't even moving. And so what I didn't realize was that what other people were talking about energetics, I was just experiencing as full body sensation, buzzing, and then it sort of grew from there, because essentially I was tapping into almost the nervous system and the bioelectric mechanical body of myself and the other person.
Well, you think about like a really experienced body worker, and I'll say that I was one of those. My clients would intentionally not tell me about a certain area of their body that was really hurting. They're like, I don't want her to go there, it hurts too much. And they would say nothing, and I would start at their head. And suddenly, my hands, like there was magnets, would go straight to the part that needed it.
Yes.
And they're like, I intentionally didn't tell you to. And this happened like 100% of the time. So there is something in trained touch, whether it's hands or a penis, it sounds like, where at some point you're just feeling where there might be dissonance in the body, and then also where resonance is in the body, and ways of being with that body part, so that there's more blood flow and more aliveness that comes from that space. So it seems like it's touch intelligence in some ways.
A lot of that started again with my own self-practice, where I would be touching myself, knowing where my hand is, even though I wasn't looking on my penis, And at the same time too, when I would even give myself a massage, because I was playing sports and had pains and aches, listening to, oh, I haven't learned this technique to go ahead and relieve stress from here, or tension or pain. And so, but by breathing and moving and starting to manipulate with my hands the different tissues of the body, I could then feel, okay, this is what I need, this is what's going to take me in a direction. So there's this kind of cyclical education pattern that I gain with myself that then
because you were actually willing to listen, because this is the complaint.
Again, I wasn't going for an orgasm or not to orgasm.
But I think one of the big complaints from women is that they can't seem to be ever able to give any feedback, even about touch sensitivity, because the person gets offended or shut down or annoyed or like, I am going slow, what's your problem, right? So a really good lover, not just with his hands, but with his cock, has that kind of touch sensitivity where they're willing every day, even if it's with the same partner or different partners, but every day to be curious through the experience and actually allow the experience to teach them something, not just come to the experience, I know everything, it's gonna go this way, and that's how it is. And then literally the amount of women who've said to me, yeah, the guy I'm with, he said there's something wrong with me because he's been able to please all the other women before me and I'm the difficult one.
Well, for me, I found it such a blessing when I had a partner that would share insights into what they were feeling, into what they were doing, what they wanted more of. I mean, I remember when I really first started having sex in university, it became a big test. I was like, oh, you know what? Sure, I can do this, this, and this, but let's see what she's capable of. And so I would have, the test was always let them be on top and see where their hips would take them. Were they capable of actually bringing themselves into states of pleasure, and as opposed to like a hard guidance of they're pinned down or I'm doing something, I would flow with their body and see if there would be a natural rhythm that would emerge, and then improvisations of, you know, what our bodies were doing, and then if that would lead us to new places, as opposed to then having a routine experience.
Which sounds like anyone who's great at a sports or dance or art or anything, you go into a flow state.
Yeah. I mean, I think if, for instance, if you're playing basketball and you know you're a really great basketball player, sure, you could go ahead and just beat the other person, but sometimes you sort of want to see, okay, well, what are they capable of? Where are they at? What things are they doing differently? What can I learn from every single experience? And that's how I started to approach sex then.
So we did an episode where we talked about your injury, and we talked a lot about the YAFAP program, and so for listeners, you definitely need to check out that episode. But I want to just bring a little piece of that here, where, I mean, not all men are faced with the fact, I mean, we had a doctor literally say, I have no idea how you even had any use of your penis for the amount of scar tissue that you had, because it was a pretty severe injury. You were still functioning sexually, meaning you still had a partner, you were having sex, and from the stories you share, the women were like very happy with their sexual experience, and you were like, this is me at
befuddled.
This is me at 10% or less, like how can you be happy? And they were happy. Would you be willing to share just a little bit of some insights of the gift that the injury brought you in terms of the learnings, and then your own like maybe insights of the quality of sex that normal people are having, that an injured cock could feel more pleasurable to someone than anything else they had. So if those two elements we could dive in. Yeah.
Well, I had been masturbating one day I remember at that point, for me, I liked to compete with the porn stars. And so I would try and find the largest, longest clip of pornography I could find, like anything, like literally in the filter go for 40 minutes plus. And then I would get the biggest kick out of like the guy coming first and me still having my erection, and doing that multiple times and not even really going for the release. And so I was also looking like, is this real? Is it not? And so after doing this, I also was like, oh, I really need to go to the bathroom and go pee. So I get up to do that, And when I did, my urinary stream was blocked. I'm like, what is this? And so then I just sort of used my pelvic floor and leaned into it. And it took several attempts, but something was moving up my urethra and cutting me from my bladder all the way to the tip. Later found out that it was a kidney stone and that it had been lodged. And so this
Just pause there for a second. So for any man out there or a partner to a man, a kidney stone going through the urethra and cutting and causing scarring is actually common.
Yes.
It's common, and it's not properly handled by doctors, in my opinion, because once it's out, everyone just kind of go, you're fine now, it's out. So I just want to have a little pause there, because if that has happened to you, then there's definitely ways where you can recuperate not only full function, but actually even enhanced function.
Well, and what I ended up doing after that was it completely changed my relationship to going into pleasure seeking and more into pleasure regulation.
Okay.
Because what I noticed was that now doctors would tell me, oh, there's nothing wrong, we can't see anything. I mean, there was actually a bit of the stone that was still lodged, like deep inside in the tissue.
For years, right?
For years, that I could feel myself. I think it was around, it was probably around 8 years until I finally got that unlodged, which I did myself using a urethral sound, which, I mean, any doctor that hears that or urologist is like, you're crazy. Like, I would never recommend that. How did you do that? Tell me. And so but what I noticed was that I would have to use all these skills and acquire skills to regulate my pleasure to go to a certain level, because if it went too high, then I would just ejaculate sometimes without even having contractions, not necessarily having the full
without an erection sometimes.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And so it was as if there was an energetic block that was going on there. I use that word now. I just felt it as a cap on my pleasure. That was the word that I used then. And so this gave me a couple realizations. One, I started to realize, okay, I'm having sex with women still. Well, first of all, one, doctors say that everything's fine because I can get an erection, I can maintain an erection, I can ejaculate. The fact that I'm having sex for now 20, 25 minutes or so, no issue. And then I'm having to regulate pleasure. They're like, well, that's above and beyond the norm. So you're doing great. Like, what's the problem here? I was like, okay, so this is the reality of the medical field, which is very much around reproduction and the function of sex to reproduce. Which in that case, I could reproduce, technically. And and then the other part was, the second realization was that with my female partners, that they're like, this is incredible. Like, what do you mean that you're kind of at your max? I'm like, well, I can feel that you're at like maybe the 20th percentile of your pleasure that has unlimited capabilities. Not to mention, I feel like I'm operating here at 10%. And they're like, this is amazing. This is the best sex I've ever had. And I realized, wow, okay, the bar for good sex is just extremely low. And
the bar for good sex for women isn't just that you have a penis in it, that it gets hard. That's nice, of course. But good sex is also like, how connected are we?
Yes.
How attuned are you to me? How much can you read what's going on? How sensitive are you in the cues of picking up what's really lighting me up and what isn't? So how open and available are you in your heart, in your presence, even if we're not in a long-term experience? Are you actually there? Like I said, I was much rather have an untrained guy with an open heart than not. So are you actually here with me, or are you somewhere else, or thinking of somewhere else, or doing something else? So there's a lot of elements that make sex good that you just naturally, I think, developed because of who you are, and that you care for people, and that you are interested in sex, and you like pleasure, and you're very sensual. All of those characteristics are there. Plus, then you had the challenge of the actual function of the cock.
Well, some of the things I had to my benefit was that I had friendships with women for a long time before I became sexual with them, which I consider this, the F stamp, as I mentioned before. But the truth was that actually allowed me to really listen to, feel the emotions, have empathy, and that form of connection, which when you're with a woman who maybe hasn't really had that great of sex on a physical level, it's the emotional connection, the feelings of romance. I was a huge romantic at the time, and still am, but there's other sides to that as well. I would say that I was even a bit on the hopeless romantic side, and until I decided to take the F stamp off. And this was a piece that then translated into sex that one allowed for that. Now, I really find interesting what you say about a great lover is one that attunes to you. And this was the gift and the curse of the injury.
Yes.
It hypersensitized my penis.
So can you explain what that means?
It meant that I could feel my penis at all times, everywhere, everything that it was doing.
Every sensation.
Every sensation.
Even if you wore a condom?
Condomless, in my pants, no contact. Like my cock would feel another person's arousal in the room, and just it was like a tuning fork. It would go ding, and it would just start to buzz, because one, that place was so activated that it could almost be uncomfortable. But at the same time, there was a sensitivity that was there that made it very easy to attune to the other person. The second thing that it did was that I would very quickly go into high states of pleasure, because where, most people would never really need to be stimulated because of where the stone was lodged. It was constantly stimulating that nerve. And so I was just in high states of pleasure. And so then I gained the other bit of knowledge, which is not just the hypersensitivity of being able to tune and feel into what's happening in the other person's body before they would even recognize it, is that it gave me the insight of, oh wait, one of the biggest turn-ons here is my level of pleasure is being tuned into by others. So as long as you're not seeking out pleasure from maybe a more mental standpoint of trying to hurt or harm the other person, or just because you've numbed yourself out, and so you need it a particular way, as opposed to tuning into the other person, feeling that pleasure as one's own as well, or feeling one's own pleasure as their pleasure, from that genuine place, the bodies actually are built for one another. So this idea of, well, it's his or her pleasure, giver or receiver, and you need to turn take, never at all was the truth.
I think that was before you even knew what section sex was the origins already started quite a long time ago. You had mentioned to me, and it's something that we do a lot, around the pause, and you said that you learned that from the time of your injury. Tell us more about that, because I feel like that's another mastery skill. When a man understands the pause and doesn't just go, I can't stop moving because I'll lose my erection. That's when you're now in the neurotic or anxious side of sexuality. So could you explain a little the healthy side of pausing, what it actually does to the erection, what happens, what you've noticed happen in the vulva, and then what you notice happen with shared pleasure?
Well, before the injury, I would be having a sexual experience, and I would feel the charge and the urge and the buildup, and just, like a stallion, just drive into the orgasm and then completely continue through. And then go until my partner was, exasperated. Well, all of a sudden now, when I had the injury, I would notice, okay, my pleasure doesn't expand into this state where then I need to sort of regulate my pleasure, because then it'll just end sooner than I want it to, sooner than the other person will want it to. And so I would take pauses. But then, as opposed to just judging myself and saying, see, you're not capable.
Correct.
What's going on? I observed that the other person wasn't complaining.
Pause is so hot.
In fact, that pause would allow for one, if they had an orgasm, that they could integrate that level of
So
pleasure
important.
into their body.
Otherwise, you stay in kind of a sympathetic orgasmic state.
Well, tell a little bit, like, what is it like in your body when you have a strong orgasm and then a person just continues to plow away versus actually pauses and allows you to integrate that? What does that mean, even, to integrate one's pleasure?
Well, there is something to kind of just, keeping moving
Yes.
and riding and a wave and kind of slightly pushing me into the next expressions. Sure, there's something
Yes.
to that, a bit like when you're hiking very intensely and you see the top of the mountain, you're like, oh, let's just keep going and don't stop because we're going to
Yes.
get there. Sure, okay. But the way better sex is when I have an intense orgasm and then there's a stillness a little bit that comes after. Because in that stillness, it's hard to describe, but it's when there's no movement, you have huge access to the energetic experience and the sensations. And the more movement, the less awareness of that. So I always noticed that it was this weird like yin yang. Like if I'm moving very physically, there's more physical sensation, but I lose track of the energetic. And as soon as the physical sensations diminish, then the energetic really comes online. So if I've had a big physical orgasm through the act of moving and being sexual, then that pause allows for all the nuanced sensations to really come online. So sometimes it feels like this delicious, very light mist that moves up and through the body and then kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. Scintillate? Is that the word?
Like the scintillation, like it,
Yes,
okay,
it's like
all the senses start to vibrate. Yeah.
and it's a vibration, but soft, and it's so soft that if we move again, I lose it. So if I'm given a moment, there's that. Then
Yes.
there's the calibration out of the sympathetic, which is very intense arousal, into parasympathetic or relaxed arousal, where then my whole body becomes even more sensual. And then I notice, like, in my own physicality, the pussy or whatever, there's another layer of wetness or softness that happens that then contributes to yet another big, crescendo. So I find the pause very, very sexy. I find the pause really important so that there isn't a buildup of tension in the pelvic floor or in my lower belly or around my uterus. The pause kind of allows all the tissues to go, okay, and the pause also find it very like bonding. There's a moment of maybe looking into each other's eyes, or if I can't see your eyes, you're behind me, just feeling into your heartbeat, feeling your breath. And so intimacy on another layer seems really loud in the pause. And I find that important for later, after the sex, where I need to kind of feel who I am now after that experience. And am I integrated? Do I feel alone? Do I feel connected? So if there's been pauses, I'm way more integrated than after. And we notice sometimes with friends who are osteos, I said, how do you calibrate extreme ecstatic states and then not go into fighting with each other later? Because in the extreme ecstatic states, when you're coming out of that, sometimes there's a bit of roughness or I don't know, something happens. The pause for me feels like it smooths things out along the way, so you don't have such a jarring back to reality after the ecstatic extension.
Most people after they dance, they'll still bow to each other or say like a thank you or something, as opposed to just music stops, you just walk away.
Yeah.
You're just like left there like, what? Yeah. So when you've opened yourself up sexually, then to just have it end, that is going to create a bit of a jar between, we've just literally united our bodies to become one, and now how do we shift back into our own energy without just
Yes.
we're done.
And I will pause in my own self-pleasure a lot. I'll come to like a crescendo and then I completely stop. And if someone were to walk in that moment, they'd think I'm just sleeping because I literally look dead. But inside, I'm feeling so much. So I love and appreciate the pause in a masterful lover.
Well,
But it's not
again,
boring to you, right?
No, I mean, during my solo practice, when I was going through the multi-orgasmic book and doing that, I mean, a lot of it also would be that you'd have these peaks and then you'd just sit there, and I would notice like the amount of energy that I would feel when I would not be stroking my cock, but then at the same time being able to stroke and take me to that next level. So and the feeling that I would feel there was as if there was a dissolving or an expansion of self that just was buzzing. But then when I would pause, everything would come back together, but all the cells would be even more charged.
Yes.
And so then when I started to, because of the injury, take the pause during sex, as opposed to the other person going, oh, peak, and collapse, and like, oh, they've exhausted, I've done my job, which is, I think, what you'd see a lot of times typically in porn. Well, now all of a sudden, there was instead this explosion of pleasure and then this tingling that would happen. And then as the person began to like literally reintegrate back into their own body and become aware of what was going on, then all of a sudden they were ready. Their body would just naturally start moving. But the amount of current, the pleasure, the electricity that I would feel between myself and them would be at a whole other level. And then from there, the whole cycle would start. So as opposed to having this kind of crash, it was this constant up and up and up, and always wondering like, wow, where, and at the same time, a depth of connection, because the person could trust you. They didn't have to worry about you sort of overriding their bodily systems.
Well, we spoke about how like a trained pussy can be also healing for a lover to experience. I absolutely know, because you've shared stories, not only with your ex-wife, who you both went through a deep sexual healing together, but sometimes, just a casual lover, and their reflections of the impact of being with you. And I'm just curious, like, if you could list off some of the traits that emerge from women who you blessed with your presence.
Jeez,
well, I think it's a blessing. I think if someone's cultivating this much and then consciously choosing to engage with a person, you're bringing a gift to that person, whether you have a female or male body. If you've done this, I've always said that now you need to be more selective, because you're suddenly integrated in gourmet, and it will impact in such a way where the person could become instantly addictive or think they're madly in love or, whatever. So there is, obviously some conscious choices to be made around that. But say you've made those conscious choices, you've had the experience, you're getting the reflection. I mean, I can give you my reflections of experiencing conscious cock, but I think it would be nice also for people to hear.
So this is a difference. I'm glad that you bring up this piece on a person potentially becoming very addicted, because I did not notice that happening in the relations that I had. In fact, it was the exact opposite. So I definitely would see the guys in university that would do, it seemed a lot of times maybe less about the sex, but the romantic gestures that they would do, or maybe that they would actually maybe just use the girl and then not really want to see them, and then that girl would want to prove herself and to keep coming back. And so there was this sort of addictive quality of wanting to affirm themselves, that when I actually would talk to my female friends, I'm like, well, tell me about the physical side of it. And it never really seemed that spectacular, but they were hooked though, because what they really wanted was a validation. And so in the sexual experiences that I had, I noticed that the women that I shared myself in my bed with, and not always a bed, could be, anyway, lots of places. Remember the library at the University of Michigan. Anyways.
Maybe that's why you chose the librarian card.
Why I chose the what?
The librarian card.
Oh, geez, for the cards that you showed me for the full moon. Yeah, maybe so. Lots of knowledge down there. But what I would notice, a typical thing that was being said was an ability to gain their voice, an ability to state what they wanted in the moment, a better understanding of how their body worked and what they liked, a better choice of what it was like to be with someone that actually would want to listen to, be curious about them, and that their pleasure actually mattered. And so then I'd say on the emotional level, there was huge amounts of release around guilt or shame, the ability to just have sex for their own pleasure as opposed to just for performing for the other person. And that was the merit of if the sex was good or not, as well, did the guy get off? Did the guy think that I was the best there? Does he want to come back to me? Instead, they found their own standards, and they also knew then how to navigate situations where they did encounter either emotional or physical tension, and how to move through that. And so they would typically feel empowered. And once they felt empowered, they felt validated from their own inside. And there they didn't have that hook with me, which was, oh, now I need to go to you. They actually had a confidence of, well, I could go to anybody. However, I'm going to return you because I enjoy that.
I just want to have a little moment of brag about you.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Before we wrap up. And so the gift that we give each other through training in this way is we access our deep erotic intelligence. And for me, that doesn't have a timeline. It doesn't have an age. It just keeps evolving. And just in my time with you, which hasn't been like that long, a few years, but I have noticed that we've evolved, and we've, our experiences evolve, and the level and the quality and the depth is evolving, and I like that. It's the landscape is always kind of in a flourishing experience. So, but I want to go back in time to before we ever even were physical. We did have some kind of like phone sex or some more energetic practice like that. And what blew my mind is you had never met my body. You didn't really know my body, but you, even on an energetic level over a long distance, knew exactly what position I was in. I hadn't told you. And you could follow my pleasure that far away.
So we were doing...
like phone sex.
Yes, we were having phone sex where you'd be stimulating yourself physically, I'd be stimulating myself physically, but with our words and our bodies, we would be still...
pretending they were together,
the dance and orienting
each other. Yeah.
Well, it didn't feel like pretend. But, yeah.
But I want to just say that there is a gift to connection that goes over time and space. And then when you're actually in person, that just keeps amplifying. So I just want to honor anyone who wants to learn about their body. If it's men, I mean, the FF's a great place to start. But I think in the university, we have huge amount of library of material for men to really learn about how to use their fingers, their mouth, and their cock in such an in-depth way that it's quite profound. And then for couples to play together, we have a lot of stuff that couples can learn, because I think the journey is endless. We can access erotic intelligence and just keep blooming together. And the untamed aspect of the title, I just also want to mention something, is that's healthy. That's the part of deeply trusting erotic intelligence, that we don't have to put it in a box. Sex has to look a very particular way, otherwise it doesn't work, that there's a lot of freedom there. So just want to mention that.
Well, one of the pieces that I noticed was a huge shift for me is so many guys are fixated on the size of their penis and how much ejaculate they can release. That seems to be sort of a measure of potency. And when I had first unlodged the stone, I was with my partner and they're like, oh, I want to try this out. And I remember my cock wasn't even erect after I released the stone, and it was standing out. And I remember this buzz that was happening further out than the physical head of my penis. And it felt like literally a tuning fork. I'm like, whoa, that's an interesting, like, tingling. And then I started to kind of imagine it further out or closer. And I'm like, whoa, I can sort of move that. So then when my partner comes home, she's all like, what, you got the stone removed? Like, what? Let's try it out, And I'm sort of in this very altered state. I'm like, okay, let's go for it. And we're having sex. meaning I'm actually inside her, penetrating her, and there was a building across the way from where I would be doing pull-ups in my room, and I would look out the window and see myself sort of doing the pull-ups from over there, maybe as a way just to get more sets in so I wasn't just burning through my arms. But I remember going, okay, well, what if I move that little energy buzz kind of to her stomach now? So it's like, all of a sudden now it's like in the stomach. She kind of goes like, oh, like this. And I'm like, oh, how about to her heart? She's like, oh, like that. I'm like, well, that's interesting. She seems to be like feeling the sensation, and it's clearly now like going beyond the length of like any person's penis, because it's this sort of energy. This is where I probably first really like got a taste of energy body beyond the physical realms. And I go, what if I put my mind like over the yard into this other building? And when I did that, there was literally a pop, like as you cracked a knuckle or something, like in the top of her head, and she just goes like that and goes, whoa. She's like, what was that? I'm like, whoa, what was that? And she said that she just felt that my cock had just penetrated through the top of her head. And I was like, wow, okay, so this energy thing is really beyond the physical limits of what we imagine our bodies can do. And I imagine this is what you're saying by, well, some guys, like they might have a really big one, but I literally can't feel it, versus someone that has a relatively small penis or even a very small penis, all of a sudden you can feel it throughout their whole body. So part of that is really in these practices, as opposed to this is the ritual of the practice. It's how can we start to really feel our whole bodies while at the same time attuning to our partner's body, and then growing our pleasure capacity.
Absolutely.
And bringing that into the expression, whether it's through our penis, whether it's through our hands, whether it's through our tongue, our mouths, our whole expression with touch, with presence, understanding the erotic mind. Like, it's all in the Embodied Love University. And this November, 2025, I am putting together a program for men that will grow into a community aspect as well of the Embodied Love University, because this is a lifelong process, and having people with whom you can communicate about it with, actually having practices that you can integrate into your life, and a big one, which you mentioned, which is eventually, if you don't, or if you do, a partner to practice it with. Just take things to a whole new level, and you start to understand that making love is something that you actually learn to do. It's something that you fully embody, and it's a life skill. The same way learning how to cook or learning how to deal with finances and all these things. So,
well, I'm very excited, and so definitely check out Embodied Love University, all the courses there, and I can't wait. There's another episode we're going to do around cocks and condoms, which I don't know what we'll have a title for that, but I'm excited for that, for a whole other level of empowerment with safe sex. So stay tuned for that as well.
I mean, if you can feel through miles of energy, then feeling through a little bit of condom shouldn't be an issue at all. And if you aren't a member for this episode, highly recommend that you do, because there will have been an erotic insert where we'll be going through, well, what is the sensation of
a trained and untamed cock
during the act of lovemaking? Audio insert.
To join us for the complete and explicit version of this podcast, just simply upgrade your membership and you'll get instant access.